All right. About an hour ago, I was sitting at the salon and I was talking to Blue over the phone. And we were going back and forth over, small talk. But as I sat there as the only person in the business, I thought to myself, if I wasn't here, this business owner would be making $0. And there was nothing else to look at because she didn't speak a word of English. And all there was the TV to look at. On the TV, there was uh, some sort of boat racing. It looked really fancy, like to the extent where every time they panned the camera into the crowd, there wasn't a single person in that crowd that didn't have $1 million. I think they called it regalia racing or something like that, where they're on these hydrofoils racing across the ocean and just really dumb things, right? Rich people like dumb sports like polo and synchronized swimming. Rich people get to enjoy the real luxury in life while you're sitting at home with an aluminum antenna on your TV that you've had for 20 years trying to watch the game and hoping your TV stays on long enough so that you can continue entertaining yourself in the cheapest possible way. That's the difference between them and us. They travel. We sit at home during our vacations in the dark, trying not to waste extra electricity because we don't have the money to pay the power bill. There's a big difference between actually being alive and existing. Most of us fall into the column of just existing. I haven't done what I would consider something fun in my entire adult life. Fun stopped the second I didn't have my parents' money. There was nothing fun about life. And going, having to have a proly job on top of having a miserable life is just, it's the icing on the cake of truly just being worthless. And most of us are completely worthless. I know that if I lived to be a million years, I'd still be completely worthless. And every time someone asks me when the last time I went somewhere was, I just look at them and I'm like, that's not part of my life. My friend's getting ready to get on an airplane to go fly back east to spend a couple of weeks visiting her parents on the East Coast. And she asks me this question every time she goes. When are we going to go on a vacation, or when are we going to get on an airplane? And I reach in and I pull my pockets out, and it's like, do you think I have money for vacations? And she just looks at me, she blinks, and she just doesn't understand. Because sometimes people don't understand what it's like to truly be poor. Open my fridge right now. Look in there. You tell me if I'm not poor. Right now, I was just doing a count of how much water I have. So I brought 2 gallons in. I filled up the 5 gallon bottle, and then I have my little 3 gallon dispenser. All of these bottles were filled with 40 cent a gallon water. That's that's some poor people living. Yesterday, in between chores, I went to the dollar store to buy laundry detergent in the little bottles. I mean, there are sure signs. You can walk around somebody's house and realize that they're poor. This is a poor person's house. In fact, yesterday, when Mello stopped in here so I could change out of my workout clothes, I I asked her, it's like, does it feel poor? Or does it feel like, what does my house feel like? Because she's had a home, she's lived in an actual house for decades, I imagine. And I asked her because my house is very sparsely furnished. I mean, for a long time, all I owned was pretty much just a bed and a toilet. But, all right, I'm off on a tangent. Let's get, let's focus on today's topic. Too qualified for the minimum wage. I got rejected from a job that pays less than what I owe in monthly interest on my student loans. Why? Because I'm overqualified. Translation: we've seen too much. I ask too many questions, and I might start a union if you make me wear a name tag and smile. In this economy, being educated and self aware is a red flag. They don't want thinkers, they want survivors. They, this country doesn't want its population full of thinkers. They want a population full of slaves. People who think too much, like myself, well, we're a pain in the rear end. I remember when I worked at Walmart, and it was understood, and this is something the managers told every single employee every day. You say the word union here, and we'll have people from corporate shutting down this place, and they will fire every single one of you. That was a daily threat there. You want a union? Go somewhere else. This place, Walmart's for slaves. They absolutely don't want anyone getting comfortable there. They don't want anyone thinking that they're better than their job. They want you to show up every single day for the minimum wage and work like the owner. And this is across the broad spectrum. The Death Star, as we're now calling corporate America, thanks to Claire on the Road. If you guys haven't seen her video today, it's hilarious about how they cranked up the surveillance at the Amazon warehouse where she used to work. And she refers to the corporation as the Death Star. And I loved that name. And it will be a name that will be used here going forward. We all get into the Death Star every morning. And it's not our fault. It's not like there are other places like Happyville or Untouchable Nation or no rear entranceville. There's just Pound Town, Evil Corp, and Death Star. Anyhow, with that said, let's get into talking point number one. Companies claim to value education and experience, yet reject applicants who have both because they might not stay long or expect too much. It's not about qualifications, it's about control. Desperate workers are easier to manage than self aware ones. This is something that I've said for years. If you have options, you're not going to work here. Because if you don't have to subject yourself to the indignity of the minimum wage, you won't. Every retail job I've ever had in my entire life has a type that they're looking for. Most likely, you don't have a car, you don't have a girlfriend, you have no life aspirations, you have some education, so you're smart enough to do the work, but you also don't care about promotions or moving up or making more money. You're content living in your parents' basement while you work at the grocery store or the 99-cent store. They have to find people who are content to have nothing. What do I keep saying? You will be happy and own nothing. These are people, like I mentioned earlier, we don't go on vacations. We don't have a lot of food. We don't have dreams anymore. Our life is to go to work, do whatever menial task they ask us to do, try to do as little as possible to fight the system. Because the second you start fighting the system fights back against you. That means you won't be there long, and it means you'll just be working across the street at the Death Star Part 2, or the Death Star Part 3, or the Death Star Part 4. For the proletariat, we just move around. We leave one place, we go to the other. But at 8 a.m., it's always Pound Town. And believe me, you're not doing the pounding. Talking point number two. Most low-wage jobs aren't looking for talent. They're looking for obedience, emotional suppression, and exhaustion. Workers are hired based on how easy they are to exploit, not how skilled they are. This is exactly what happened to all of our indigenous workers, seasonal workers that came from south of this country. They weren't hired because they were graduates from MIT or because they were going to take away all the CEO jobs in America. They were hired based on how easy they were to exploit. And when you have a population of people that can in no way fight back, they don't speak the language, they have no education, all they know is that they have to work hard so that they can feed their families. That's the only thing going on inside of the mind of an immigrant. They'll do any job for the lowest pay in the worst conditions. Americans, to some degree, at least not the ones in the higher tiers of our working class, most American workers will not put up with the conditions that immigrants will. That means that in order to find people, and this is what I don't get, if you're going to hire those people based on how easy they are to exploit, shouldn't you be the one that's being punished? Shouldn't be you be the one that's being sent back because you're a bad person for doing that to people, not the people that are being subjected to that treatment, to the indignity, to those conditions? Shouldn't they punish the people that enable immigrants to be able to continue to survive here? Or have we become so dependent on cheap migrant labor that we turn and look the other way when we see them working in the back of the kitchen, when you see them working the fields, when you see them picking your fruits and vegetables, when you see them working in the meat packing industry, or they're cleaning your house, or they're cutting your trees and your grass. America has this very, very easy way of looking in the other direction when it comes to the people that are visibly being exploited. And you know what we do? Is we just we turn our vision into invisibility for the poor. If all of those minimum wage workers were something we had to constantly deal with, we would do something about it. But America as a whole has decided that those people they're not human. They're invisible. They're the invisible workforce that allows us to have cheap labor. And as you dismantle that system with places like Alligator Alcatraz, just think of that. We live in a society where the term alligator Alcatraz exists. What has happened to this world? What has happened to the IQ of the average person? Don't you understand that everything has to cost more if you need to pay someone double or triple the amount of money that you were paying before in order to do the same task? Is America that simple that somehow you're going to let the politicians trick you into taking jobs that you wouldn't have touched with a 10-foot pole a year ago? Factory jobs are hard. Factory jobs are miserable. Factory jobs in China have to have safety nets in order to keep the workers from deciding that it's better to be free rather than continue to work at an awful place like Foxconn. Those are the types of conditions they're bringing back here for you to participate. And somehow they're trying to make it patriotic to do the work of people that you've kicked out of your country. I don't think Americans have realized what they're trying to do to them. In England, they used to have something called the workhouse. I did a video about 5 years ago about how they could incorporate the workhouse into our present society. Back then, it was satire. Today, it's a possibility. With everyone being buried in debt, not having money to be able to get out of that debt, and seeing a future that's not a real future. I call this channel Dystopian Entertainment because I wanted to make fun of the world that we live in. But it's not funny anymore. It's frightening. Remember what I like to say. If you're not scared enough about having to find another job in this job economy. And if you need a poster child that we're going to put up there to show a person who has continually been laid off over and over and over in the past year, just look at Astra. Tech firm after tech firm after tech firm has let her go. She's young, she's educated, and now she's going into finance. I think she starts her job next week in finance. And what is she doing in between careers, you might ask? What you would expect someone with an education and lots of skills to not have to be doing. She's driving around for DoorDash. I know for a fact that one of my work friends right now is driving around with a PhD. She's driving around with her husband delivering food right now because he lost his job over a month ago. And remote $150,000 a year jobs, well, you just don't find them laying around on Indeed. All right, let's go to talking point number 3. If you're not grateful to be overworked and underpaid, you're called entitled. Being too qualified is just code for you're not broken enough to accept the abuse quietly that we offer at the Death Star. Can you imagine? Even the AI understands that everyday workers across the entire spectrum of America, the 99%, have to expect to be exploited on a daily basis. And if you've ever worked in low-level jobs, those managers are like giant children. I've had a manager stand right next to me and scream at me because I didn't do the required computer-based training for working in that department. I mean, absolutely screaming. You're talking about a 35-year-old man that's morbidly obese that thinks he's the coolest guy ever because he's a general manager in a grocery store. Scream at you like you were a complete retard. That's the kind of trauma that people are walking around with in present day America. You have managers that want to treat every worker like every single minute that they're there for only one thing: to be exploited, to be treated as subhuman, to be treated like domesticated human beings that even if they opened the gate to the corral, they wouldn't know what to do. Most Americans need Evil Corp to keep them alive. You and I both don't know how to grow our own vegetables, hunt animals, or do anything to perpetuate our survival aside from working a crummy job. Our crummy job is the only way that we get to live indoors. You take away America's millions, tens of hundreds of millions of jobs out there that all suck, and you have an entire class, an entire system that falls apart. We can't just revert back to people that know how to live without the piece of crap job. That's the society we live in. We've allowed ourselves to be domesticated into an animal that can only push buttons on a keyboard. That's what we are. Besides that, we have lost all of our animal instincts because we haven't needed them in 100 years. And for those of you who are going to talk about off-grid living or how you live off the land or you do this or that, that's not the rest of us. Most of us live in big cities. Most of us don't own any land. We don't own any implements of hunting. I have a few fishing rods, but who wants to go outside and fish in a pond that's full of gray water? If you don't know what gray water is, look it up. But all of these lakes around here, all of the urban lakes, use gray water to fill them. Once you know what gray water is, you'll think twice about eating anything that comes anywhere near what gray water is. All right, let's get to our conclusion. If you're stuck in the same loop, too smart to be silent, too broke to say no, just know you're not crazy. The system is. They don't reject you because you're unworthy. They reject you because you might actually demand better. And someday, when enough of us say no to crumbs, they're going to have to serve something real. I think this is why they have a company pizza party on a more regular basis. Because they know that that might be the only halfway decent meal that worker gets in that week. It reminds me a lot of the free lunch program when I was going to elementary school, that they'd give you a punch card, and that every day you would have to come and get your breakfast and lunch using that little punch ticket. And we all knew the kids that were on the free lunch program because they we'd be standing in line. And I know that my parents were always trying to work the system because when you have immigrant parents, well, they're not working on W-2s. They work on cash only. Like if you ever have to deal with a landscaper or a cleaning lady or someone that's picking fruit, they're the ones that still benefit from cash money. In fact, while I worked at Walmart at the money center, all these people came every Friday afternoon to cash their checks or or get money. Oh, or do money orders to send money back to Mexico. Those were the two most common transactions on a Friday afternoon working the money center is money orders and check cashing, and all for people who didn't have bank accounts. And it was something that, and this wasn't a, what do you call it, a bad part of town. I can only imagine that these lines are enormous in the more ethnically diverse areas of the city. But that's what poor people do. It's like they accept the crumbs. And I think that our overseers of our society and the world would like for more of us to turn into them, to people that accept the crumbs, don't complain, and when you get laid off, that you just accept the fact that you weren't necessary anymore. Because a lot of people think, like I was having a conversation with someone Friday morning, and she said, you know, if I get fired, Millennial Steam, it's going to be very hard on me because a lot of people, they embody their job. Their job gives you identity. Even if you're uh, putting the fries in the bag, little bro, it's still part of your identity because we don't really have an identity in our current society. We don't really do anything. So the thing that you do every day identifies you to not only yourself, but other members within your society. And for the most part, most of us have very low status ranks within our own society.